Hey folks, I got a great video for you today. I'm going to show you everything that I have been buying over the last few hours. I've been making some pretty big moves in the market, and as promised, I'll show you everything that I do in these accounts on my journey to $2 million in net worth to reach financial independence. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. We just started this channel a little over a week ago. We've already got 15 subs, so thank you so much for coming along in this journey. I am tracking everything that I'm doing to get to early retirement. As someone who is a dad, just a normal dad, been investing since 2009, sharing the mistakes I've made and all of the wins and everything in between. So let's go ahead and get right into it. $1.4 million net worth. These are the buys that I had for today. I've been buying VIEW and QQQ and VUG. The VIEW is the index for the ETF for Vanguard. QQQ is the NASDAQ. VUG is the growth ETF for Vanguard. I love these funds, and VTI is a total market at $500. $1,500 of VIEW. That's how I build my core. And I've been buying also Bitcoin today since it's been down. And then from the core and outside of that, I build satellite positions for diversification. I got $10,000 in the VXUS. That was a big position. I'm taking the International Vanguard Fund. I love that fund. And then from there is the Mag 7. I build around the core of the portfolio with the Mag 7. I've been investing in the Mag 7 for many, many years. And I'm most bullish on NVIDIA and Amazon and Google. So 250 a pop there. More Bitcoin. I've also started a new position in VOT. That is a growth mid-cap fund ETF, and I am excited to get diversification in mid-caps to see more growth. Microsoft has been so down, so I had to buy more Microsoft. Bought Meta. Meta's up 10% today. I'll talk about in a minute. Buying more SpaceX. I started a position into IPO on SpaceX. A little bit of Apple, and that is exactly what we're doing in the account. And then also, I'm a growth dividend investor, and I have these set up on auto. And I'm building these up in the brokerage account. I want to build up the brokerage account so I could reach early retirement and live off the dividends. So I'm buying growth dividend stocks. I have about 15 or 20 that I've selected. And it's Texas Instruments, it's Waste Management, it's Cisco, it's Costco, it's SPGI, it's Lilly, and I'm dollar cost averaging a little bit of time to start these positions. And some I've been transferring over from other accounts that already existed. But I'm doing this on a weekly auto buy. And I love doing auto buys so I don't have to think about it. I just set it, I forget it, I know what companies I want, I buy it on dollar cost average. It removes all of the emotions and all of the stress and thinking about, should I buy here, should I not buy there? And I just buy and hold. And so that's what I've been doing. MasterCard, Caterpillar, Visa, and those are the picks for today. So let me go ahead and transition, and I want to talk about something that has happened recently. I learned that it's actually a little bit difficult to transfer funds from M1 over to Fidelity and Robinhood over Fidelity. There's some lessons learned that I want to share with you because honestly, it was pretty painful. And I'll start with Robinhood because it was the most painful. Basically, over the last couple of weeks when I initiated the full transfer, what happened was they put my whole account on restricted, so I couldn't access any of the funds in it. First, they moved over the bigger positions, but then everything else in fractional shares got sold off. So you got to be aware of that they sell off any smaller positions or fractional shares into cash. When you initiate a transfer for a whole account, they're not gonna move over the fractional shares into the small positions. At least they didn't for me. And on top of that, I couldn't access any of it because they restricted the account. Why did they restrict the account? Well, I believe it was because I had Bitcoin in there, and they can't transfer Bitcoin through their system. It's called ACATS over to Fidelity. I talked to Robinhood about this, and it was really difficult to follow what was happening. And they have like a little notification that you can see your transfer, and days and weeks started to go by and nothing had been happening. And then it says the transfer failed, the account's restricted. And so at the end of the day, I was left with like 3 options on what to do. I could either wait for the crypto to be liquidated, which was going to take months. And then that through what's called residual sweeps, they'll move them over, or I could have them liquidate it for me over the phone, or once all the transfers took place from my other funds in the account, I could reactivate the account. But there's no telling when that was going to happen because the transfers kept messing up and it was just a big pain. So what I ended up doing, and I really didn't want to do this, I ended up liquidating the crypto into cash, which is a taxable event. And that way I could just move the cash over to Fidelity as quick as possible and buy crypto through Fidelity. So that's what I ended up doing because it was the least time. It was going to save the most time because this had been going on for weeks now. And I just wanted to move everything over. Obviously could have waited around for their system to do it, but I just didn't feel like waiting anymore. So my overall experience with transferring out of Robinhood, while the people at Robinhood were really nice, the whole thing was just clunky, and maybe partly was on me. I should have done more research ahead of time for transferring a whole account and just known in the disclosures that it was going to restrict my account and I wasn't going to be able to have access to anything. And so that part of that is on me, but overall the experience, it was not fun. So we're finally getting those transfers done. M1, it was a little bit easier because I didn't have any crypto through M1. They still do lock your account down, and they do the same thing where they only send the bigger positions and all the fractional sales get sewed off into cash. And then eventually through what they do is weekly sweeps, and Robinhood, it was the same way. It takes once a week, they do a sweep of the account and then they send the funds over in cash. But the whole thing together is taking almost 2 or 3 weeks now. And it's just taking a really long time to do. I think it's taking much longer than it should. Now, I will say, as a footnote, within the first couple of days of initiating the transfer, they had both brokerages moved over the bigger positions that I had. It's just waiting for the smaller stuff to come through, and then they keep the accounts restricted. So if you had dividends or anything like that, they still come in, and then finally they do like sweeps for a few months. They sell everything off into cash, and then they transfer everything over. But all in all, it just takes a lot longer than I expected. I thought this whole thing was going to be a few days because I have another broker. I used Empower, and Empower, I just called up the rep. I initiated the transfer, and everything moved over, and it was no problem. Albeit those were much bigger positions, and I didn't have a ton of smaller, equities in those accounts through Empower. So it was just Empower. I would give an A+. Robinhood at M1, especially, I would say the M1 experience has been about a C-, and then Robinhood I would give a D. So overall, it's just taken a lot longer than I wanted to, and it's no fun not being able to access your funds when you need them and having to keep calling to figure out what's going on. Now, I also want to mention a couple of things. Why am I buying semiconductor stocks? Because they're making up at 20% of the S&P 500. It is pretty amazing the bull run that the market has had, but also just semis just blowing up. And it seems like, we could be getting into dangerous territory with the bubble. But overall, as a long-term investor, I'm very bullish on semiconductors for the AI build out for the foreseeable future. And so until the fundamentals of the companies change, I don't think that there's any reason to be too worried about it. Yes, we could have cyclical pullbacks. Yes, we could have, unforeseen events and just normal, haircuts in the market. But I don't think that's any reason to be too alarmed about semis stocks. Meta, let's talk about Meta for a second. It's up 10% on the day because of the reports on the company developing the cloud infrastructure business. Some of this is, any sort of good news. It's interesting because if you have good news, then a stock that's been beaten up like Meta, it's going to rip up. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of margin that people are using and leverage, which is there's a lot of leverage. And so it's obvious that anytime you have good news from a stock that's getting beaten up, you're just going to have a rip up like that today. So always buying Meta. I've been buying it for years. I thought this one was pretty funny because usually when Donald Trump tweets out any sort of company or mentions a company in a speech, then you just see like a ripper rally of that company. He's done that with Intel. He's done that with a whole bunch of companies. You name it, they've all done like really well over the last year. But today, when he did that with Micron, it didn't work. And I don't really know why that is. I think it could be because Micron is just gotten into kind of expensive territory, and the semis today had a pullback. And so you have big money, you have the institutions, Wall Street, that they're moving the funds around. And so when there's any sort of rotation, which I've looked at a few charts, there's unprecedented rotation going on and volatility with basically big money in Wall Street moving, and a little bit of retail, moving funds in and out of the tech stocks and in and out of semi stocks. And it's unprecedented. And I would attribute that largely to a lot of the options trading that goes on and the leverage. Well, that's all for today, folks. Just wanted to mention everything that I'm doing in the portfolio and exactly the things that I'm doing to get to that road to 2 million. So appreciate you being here. And if you like this content, please feel free to follow along. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. And we'll see you in the next one. Thanks so much.